The Twisted Game, Daniel Krug and the Murder of Kristil. A seemingly loving husband, a desperate plan, and a brutal end. The case of Daniel Krug and the murder of his wife Kristil is a chilling tale of manipulation, control, and the devastating consequences of a twisted mind. Give a like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Daniel and Kristil Krug appeared to be a typical suburban couple, but behind closed doors, their marriage was fracturing. The prosecution argued that Daniel, facing the loss of his wife, concocted a bizarre and sinister scheme. His plan was to pose as Kristil's former boyfriend, hoping to reignite her affections by playing the role of her protector. This wasn't a spontaneous act of passion, but a calculated manipulation designed to control Kristil's emotions and ultimately her life. The initial stages of Krug's plan involved creating a false narrative of threat and vulnerability. He began sending Kristil threatening texts and emails, meticulously crafting a persona of a jealous and obsessive ex-lover. These messages weren't just random acts of harassment. They were carefully designed to instill fear in Kristil, making her feel increasingly unsafe and dependent on Daniel for protection. Kristil, unaware of her husband's involvement, documented these disturbing communications, unknowingly building a case against him. The messages painted a picture of someone watching her, someone who knew her routines and movements. This constant sense of being observed created a climate of fear that Kristil lived with daily. As the stalking intensified, Krug realized the potential legal ramifications of his actions. The game he was playing was spiraling out of control, and the risk of exposure grew with each passing day. Faced with the prospect of criminal charges and the complete unraveling of his plan, Krug made a horrifying decision. He resolved to silence Kristil permanently, eliminating the threat of exposure and reclaiming control over his life. On December 14, 2023, after taking their children to school, Krug allegedly attacked Kristil in their home. The prosecution argued that he knocked her unconscious before delivering the fatal blow, a stab wound directly to the heart. The prosecution presented a compelling case built on circumstantial evidence and digital forensics. They meticulously pieced together a timeline of events, highlighting Krug's calculated actions before and after the murder. One of the key pieces of evidence was the email account used to send the threatening messages. Investigators traced the account's creation to Krug's workplace network, placing him at the center of the stalking plot. Further investigation revealed a burner phone used to send the threatening text messages. This phone was purchased with a gift card registered to Krug, further solidifying his connection to the crime. The prosecution also highlighted the burner phone's location data, which frequently coincided with Krug's own phone. This pattern of co-location provided strong evidence that Krug was the one sending the threatening messages. Krug's behavior after the murder also raised suspicion. He visited a coffee shop and allegedly complained about his order, a seemingly trivial act that prosecutors argued was a calculated attempt to appear calm and collected. The prosecution suggested that Krug likely wore gloves during the attack to avoid leaving DNA evidence at the scene. This attention to detail underscored the premeditated nature of the crime. The defense team argued that the prosecution's case was built on speculation and lacked concrete physical evidence directly linking Krug to the murder. They pointed to the absence of blood in his car or on his clothes as evidence of his innocence. Krug's daughter testified that he was wearing the same clothes when he drove her to the bus stop on the morning of the murder, suggesting he wouldn't have had time to change after committing the crime. The defense also highlighted the presence of unknown DNA at the crime scene, specifically partial DNA from an unidentified person found on Kristil's neck. This raised the possibility of another suspect. The defense further argued that the police investigation was flawed, alleging that investigators failed to adequately explore other potential leads and overlooked crucial evidence. They criticized the police for not testing Kristil's phone for fingerprints, which could have provided valuable clues about the identity of the perpetrator. The defense also questioned the competence of the detective investigating the stalking, suggesting that his inexperience may have hampered the investigation. The defense argued that the police failed to adequately protect Kristil despite her reporting the stalking. They questioned whether a cold-blooded killer would bother complaining about a coffee order, suggesting that Krug's behavior was inconsistent with that of a murderer. Adding another layer of complexity to the case were 3 home surveillance cameras that were not recording when Kristil was found. The camera in the garage was covered with tape, further fueling suspicion. The tape covering the garage camera contained DNA from an unknown source, raising questions about who might have tampered with the surveillance system. The malfunctioning cameras created a void in the evidence, leaving room for speculation and doubt. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury ultimately found Krug guilty of Kristil's murder. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the case, holding Krug accountable for his heinous crime. The conviction marked the end of a long and arduous legal battle, but the pain and loss endured by Kristil's family and friends will undoubtedly linger for years to come. Adding a final unsettling detail to the narrative, the prosecution confirmed that Kristil's ex-boyfriend, the man Krug impersonated, was in Utah at the time of the murder. He was an 8-hour drive away, effectively eliminating him as a suspect. This revelation underscores the depth of Krug's deception and the extent to which he went to manipulate and control Kristil. It also highlights the tragic irony of the situation. Kristil was terrified of a threat that was entirely fabricated by the person she should have been able to trust the most. The case of Daniel Krug and the murder of Kristil serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the importance of recognizing the warning signs of manipulation and control. It also raises important questions about the effectiveness of law enforcement in protecting victims of stalking and harassment. This case is a chilling example of how a seemingly normal relationship can devolve into a nightmare of violence and betrayal. It is a story that demands our attention and compels us to reflect on the complexities of human nature and the fragility of trust. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence or stalking, please seek help. Contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-SAFE 7233 or visit their website at thehotline.org. Your life matters, and you don't have to face this alone. Share this video to raise awareness and help others recognize the signs of abuse. Subscribe for more in-depth true crime analysis and support our mission to bring justice to victims and their families.